Remember this last year?
I did, well, 2 years ago. It's now 6 o'clock. I'll call the regular meeting of the Norwich School District Board of Education to order. Pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation, under God.
Thank you, everyone. Just a quick reminder, if you wish to speak during the public comment period, please make sure that your name is on the sheet over there. All right, first item of business is minutes. It is recommended that the Board of Education adopt minutes from the August 18th, 2021 regular meeting and the September 13th, 2021 special.
Motion.
Motion by Brian Burton, second by Brian Reed. Any discussion, questions, corrections, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. All right, second item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. Welcome to the Board of Education. Brian Reed, Roz, I didn't get a chance to say hello when you walked in. Hi, guys. Nice to see you. I feel like it's been a very long time since we've gathered. We've had a lot of email correspondence, of course, but so trying to think about, 2 weeks ago when we opened our doors, how might I paint a picture for what the opening of school looked like, right? It depended on what lens you were looking through, of course. So I'm going to give you a couple different viewpoints when it comes to the opening of school. The first, I'm going to paint a picture that shows a less than ideal situation. Okay, a high school principal, interim high school principal starts 3 days before the start of school. 6 drivers and a bus aide in quarantine. 4 teachers in isolation or quarantine. 2 members of the leadership team currently in isolation or quarantine. 1 student, grade 2, there has been no exposure for that student that is now tested positive for for COVID. And then we had the first 2 days, first superintendent days, they're called. Remember, that's very different, right? People call them staff days. They're called superintendent days. We're allotted 4 per week. Those first 2 days were very atypical in that they were really focused on bringing staff together around a concept of collective efficacy. We had a keynote speaker, Jenny Donahue, that was here for approximately a day and a half to really engage our staff, all staff, in a conversation about breaking down the silos at Norwich City School District. So again, very atypical start to the school year. Less than ideal conditions, significant issues I would characterize with transportation, and specifically with communication between the transportation department, the schools, and then effectively back to home. There are supervision issues in our cafeterias at our secondary level, right? These are some of the things that we're dealing with on a daily basis. The second lens that I ask you to look through is think about that within 2 weeks, we were on the verge of engaging in or administering both academic and social emotional screeners for 1,700 students in district. They'll be administered, they'll be reviewed, themes will be developed through that. And as a result, our teams will be more effectively responsive to the needs of our students, to what we characterize as almost post-pandemic. However, we certainly aren't at the end of this pandemic. We have instructional staff putting summer professional learning into practice. We have the MTSS plan and the professional learning plan that you will adopt tonight as a Board of Education. You saw that in August. The amount of work that went into development of that plan, again, a huge testament to both our teachers and our leadership team. We're working on a district-wide discipline referral process that is inclusive of the transportation department. We're engaged in long-range financial planning and transparency reporting. We have a capital improvement project of almost $35 million that is underway, and we are readying for vote in mid-November. We have new teachers being paired with their mentors throughout the district and providing time for them to be supported. We have new positions like the PLC partners pushing into the classrooms, observing students, as well as supporting our teachers in ways that we haven't been in the past. We have security upgrades for all of our buildings. Almost every single door in district has a badge access to it. We are almost keyless throughout the entire district. Yesterday, today, and probably tomorrow, we are doing drills for the lockdown system that has blue flashing lights on the exterior of all buildings, that has a panic button in the central office for all of our clerical staff to have to be responsive, more responsive than we've ever been in the event of obviously a negative experience, if you will. We have a new website, right? It is currently app-based. By the middle of October, early October, we're going to dedicate an entire day to be able to train all of our staff in what's called Thrill Share, which allows them to recognize and showcase student and staff success throughout the entire district and share that with one point of access for the entire community. To me, these are all incredible celebrations, and depending on the lens that you look through, pretty significant mountain that we have begun to climb as we started this school year. And so what I'm hoping is that the Board of Education will join me in a round of applause for all of our staff and our leadership team in making this year's opening a success, given all of those circumstances. Please join me. I want to publicly state that I'm incredibly proud of their efforts and their willingness to engage in collaboration in times that are very, again, atypical, right? Times that we may not have all the answers and the effective planning and preparation that we might normally have. But their resilience has certainly shined over the course of the last 2 weeks. And to me, that's worthy of recognition tonight. So again, thank you for that. Any questions on that piece? Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So the second piece that I'll bring to your attention is that, as you know, the district has currently a high school interim principal because of the vacancy created with the retirement of Ms. Gistangilio. And so we have set some arbitrary timelines, and today marks a very significant one, and that all applications were due today. We currently have 17 candidates to review and screen. And from this point forward, we're looking at October 6th as the first interview date for the high school principal. I'll be providing this in the Friday reflection to the board. So if you're writing this down, again, you'll be getting this on Friday. There's gonna be a lot of dates I'm gonna throw at you right now. Okay. Again, 17 candidates will be forming 4 interview committees: a community parent committee, a student committee, a staff committee, and a leadership team committee. So again, there'll be 4 committees, a maximum of 10 people on each of those committees, totaling 40 people. The interviews may have to be in the evening because of our sub shortage. So if we're pulling 10 staff members, we may not have coverage for them during the course of the school day. And so we're going to have to look at how we think about strategically setting up that day so that each candidate can rotate through. Ideally, after the screening process, we'd like to result with or end with 5 to 6 candidates that we want to bring to the interview process. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions on that as a process, please?
So I brought it up in an email earlier, but I just have concerns that having 3+ board members will trigger open meeting law in the interview committee.
Okay, tell me how, Russ.
So what we learned in school law, the training is, say 4 of us end up at a bar or that was the example Carrie Dewey.
Not the laws is
One to
the
two others, however. I actually do not leave my house. So. But he said, so say all of a sudden the 4 members start talking school issues, that triggers an open meeting law.
Yeah.
So in a committee, and I would suggest running this by Carrie Dewey. I couldn't find an exact answer online. But say you have 4 committee or board members on a committee and they're discussing personnel and school issues. That, the way I interpret it, is open meeting.
Sure.
But if you have board members sitting back and observing and not engaging, that doesn't.
Great. So again, what I'm thinking is the only committee that the Board of Education would be on would be the community/parent. And to avoid this, we would have 3 members.
Right.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll be trying to gauge interest in, again, in the Friday reflection. But yeah, so that's certainly something that's on my radar as well, Ross. We'll certainly avoid the appropriate quorum concept as much as we can. Okay. But I will double check with Perry just to make sure we can have 3 board members on a committee. Okay. It's very similar to the subcommittee concept.
Yeah, as long as there's just 3. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on that as a process? Okay. What I would show you is that what we have designed in a model that we've used in the past is that, again, if we have it whittled down to 5 candidates, 5 to 6 candidates, right? Each of those candidates would be here, start times sort of staggering throughout the day, right? If we had to start after start at 3:30, right? That would allow all the staff to be able to exit their normal roles and responsibilities and attend the interview. And then that person, the candidate, would roll through each one of those interviews and then end with me in a debriefing conversation. And also this process also allows me to debrief with each of the groups. And so I will not be sitting on any of the committees. I would simply be facilitating that. I'll be screening all of the candidates, all 17 of them, between now and October 6th. Well, certainly before October 6th, because we'll have to communicate. But that will be my goal, is to screen all 17 of them to the best of my ability and to make sure that we're bringing in someone who's qualified. If we get to a place throughout this process that we do not feel comfortable with the result, we will not settle. We will reopen this search. Okay.
Is this typical of interviewing processes in high schools or?
especially the high school.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay. So just so everybody's clear, I know one name, maybe two names that I can think of that are on the list. And two are within the region and the rest are outside of the region. So what I'm hearing from other superintendents and other people that have recently conducted high school principal searches is that it's not drawing much of a pool right now. So again, just throwing that out there just to say that's what I'm hearing. And certainly we'll be able to vet that as a group. Leadership team will be engaged in taking a look at all of those candidates. I have a binder with all of those applications. Inside the binder is if you as an individual member of the Board of Education want to come in and look through that. You can't take it with you, but you can certainly look through that. Okay? I'll make that available to you upon request. All you have to do is set up a time to come in with Lauren. Any questions?
Any other items on your report at all?
Yeah, just a couple other things in terms of timeline. Again, I'll be providing this to you later because it has a lot of dates. The week of October 11th is the week that's slated for the newsletter. As you've noticed, there hasn't been a newsletter for the district that's gone out yet. And we're waiting for the architectural firm to provide the newsletter insert, excuse me, not the newsletter insert, the capital project insert into that newsletter to save on a little bit on postage. So the week of October 11th is when that will hit the mail for our community. On October 13th, of course, Chris has asked for a Board of Ed session, a work session for you guys. What I'll tell you is that that doesn't have to involve me, that can involve only you. I have set up already with Super Eval for you to be able to have a Zoom session with Bob Hartz, who's one of the, I'll say, co-authors of Super Eval. He'll run through two major things. The first is the self-assessing process that each board member would have to engage in on an annual basis. So you're basically assessing yourself in specific domains. And the second piece is the goals that I've sent you as district goals for the superintendent. How do they fit into the system? And then how do you effectively, as a 7-person board, evaluate me and the role that I play with those goals? Okay, so that I've already set that up, tentative. You guys will have to let me know. Wait for Chris to let me know if you want me at that. But again, this space will be set up for you guys to be able to have that work session. And certainly, Chris will take the lead on that. Questions on that? Okay, in one of the subcommittee meetings, I can't remember what it was, we talked about the concept of a town hall. We missed our community meet and greet because the weather was not cooperating. Man, it was a good thing we called that, by the way, if you remember correctly. It's pretty intense. So if you remember, we opted to go with a community meet and greet this year instead of trying to parade all of our families through the buildings because of the pandemic. And, the intent of that was to really roll out mission and vision, introduce all new staff, and really allow us to publicly state to our community that we are committed to what's reduced in that mission and vision, I think differently than they've experienced in the past. And so I'd like to couple that with a town hall event that allows us collectively, a Board of Education and superintendent, to be able to answer questions from the community around capital project, right? The big question, of course, is going to be, how are we paying for it? How is this not having a tax impact on me? Explain that in layman's terms, right? We know that that's going to be a question, no matter how many times we publish that, no matter how many times we put that on a postcard, we're going to have people that are going to ask that type of question. Above and beyond that, right? I want to be able to answer some questions because there will be people that will say, why did you prioritize X over Y, right? Already it's happening. As we're talking about roofs, as we're talking about traffic flow, the good news is I think most people will be very supportive of the traffic flow changes that we're doing in the way it's experienced Gibson specifically, right? Funny story, we had an alderman called to the city of Norwich and said that they're formalizing a complaint about traffic flow at Gibson, right? So the chief of police reached out to me, do you need support? I didn't know there was an issue. I said, well, why don't you come up around either 7:20 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you might find what that issue is. And again, the whole thing comes back to the building is not designed for 250 parents to pick up their kids, right? It's not. There's no way we can do it differently right now, given the layout. However, we think that we can get a heck of a lot more efficient at it if we change how the buses come in versus how the parents come in. Okay.
We gotta be there at 1:30 to get a good parking spot.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Kieran, you could probably park in Mr. Ryan's driveway.
Yeah, any of you have free access to a driveway. Yeah.
I don't like to take advantage of privilege.
Gibson has always been a mess, no offense.
Yep. So again, I think we'll have some support in that area, but I want to provide opportunity for people to ask those questions and really understand how those things that we've identified in the capital project connect directly or align directly to our mission, vision, values. I think we can easily make that case. Okay. So that's October 19th, and that's in person, and we'll stream it, of course, for our community that cannot make it on that night. October 20th, of course, the next night is our regular Board of Ed meeting. And then, of course, please save the date once again, November 19th is the capital project vote from 11 to 8. And we're going to couple that with, remember it's on a Friday, we're coupling that with the fact that we'll have at least 300 parents, we hope, coming through the doors to watch their children in their middle school musical. And hopefully be able to have someone standing in a sandwich board, pointing them to the district office to get down here and vote. Remember, we need 60%, so it's going to be really important. We have to get them down to the district office because that's what the resolution says. But one of the other strategies we're doing right now, we had another meeting this morning, is I'll call it a poster board, right? A synopsis of really the funding stream as well as the scope of the project. That's what we're going to ask the local businesses to, we'll ask MBT, can we put this in your lobby? We'll ask the YMCA, can we put this in your lobby? That type of thing. And so we're ordering that to be able to have a presence in the community so that people have the ability to, number one, see it, ask questions, and then see contact information for school officials if they want to ask questions about it. Okay. So we're going to really try to publicize it differently than we've done in the past and not solely rely on snail mail. Okay. And that's the superintendent update.
All right, thank you very much. All right, and next item is the discussion item, and we have code of conduct on there as it has come up as an issue for discussion. Okay.
I guess, are you
Go
going
for
to,
it.
I
I'm
guess
not
I'm just gonna say
prepared.
something really short. I think it's really important that, we continuously evaluate policy for language that's inclusive and, with the times, I guess, the phrase to use. And so I, when things like this arise, I think it's really important to just kind of take a step back and take a look at what we have and have evaluated it. Move forward.
I didn't prepare anything. I thought someone else was leading the discussion. I think we need to revise it. Or I don't know how, I know the board is concerned with it because it's a policy. I think it's time we revise it. I've looked at other school districts. I have a California one, Wisconsin, and I've been comparing and stuff. And I don't know if this comes from the staff and leader or the lead principals, or do we review it in one of our policy committee meetings? But I think it, again, I wasn't prepared to go on the spot, so I'm just rambling, but dress codes typically are for, or they identify female clothing as the ones that are not following dress code. And I know our dress code is very non-gender specific and stuff, but I just think that the guys.
Yeah, just, I think we're
Brian's
talking
probably
about,
more eloquent than
I wouldn't say I'm eloquent, but, I think that when you look at a dress code, quite often it's not equitable between men and women when it comes to dress codes that are put out there. A lot of the verbiage is geared towards, like what Roz said, women's clothing, and not addressing the male. Roz got some examples that I got to read over, and I was quite surprised in the diversity of the different dress codes. Some were very generic, some were very specific. I'd like the more specific one. For example, there was one that said nothing that shows your genitals, nothing that shows nipples, nothing. It got very specific to body parts, which I think those are the body parts that a dress code should definitely be concerned with. There was another one that spoke to kind of like what I've been used to hearing in my 20 years of management is, if you stand in front of the mirror and if you bend over, you can see any part of your buttocks or your
Or
male
otherwise.
parts, whatever you're wearing is too short, things of that nature. To me, that's a little too generic, too broad. But I think we need to get it a little more specific, and I think it has to be equitable. And an example I will give is, it says, our dress code currently says no navy, right? But we allow guys to wear cutoff t-shirts that show both breasts in our school. The muscle shirt. I don't have a problem with muscle shirts, but it's got to be one that covers stuff, right? Because we wouldn't let a female wear that either. So it's got to come down a little bit to equity for both genders. And it can't just be talking about, I mean, a lot of the verbiage is spaghetti straps and things that women would wear. It's not fair, in my opinion. So I think we need to get into more of that specific verbiage when it comes to the dress code. Now, whose job is it to come up with that? I'm not so sure it's necessarily just the policy committees. I think it would be up to probably leadership, building administration, students, teachers, healthcare professionals, to maybe put that together to present to the policy committee for review. And I think once the policy committee felt that it was good to bring to the board for their review to look at, in the end, it's part of a code of conduct that we want to be able to use year after year. But I think you got to have a bunch of interested parties so you get the diversity behind it.
I agree, and I just want to kind of tweak a little bit of what you said.
Sure.
In the
Please do.
essence of, I think the less gendered the dress code is, rather than saying both genders, I think is probably the most inclusive. It will cover everybody, and I think the more specific you get about body parts, the less it has to be about gender, and.
That's why I like the one that said specific genitals.
Right,
nipples,
and I
you
can
know.
understand that that's uncomfortable, and I can understand, like, no one wants to say that. But we also don't want policy that's unfair, inequitable, and only geared towards one type of body.
I think if I have anything else further to say on this point, I agree with certainly your points. I think we have to understand what's the purpose. Often we say we don't want dress, we want to make sure the dress code's not distracting. To who? To old guys, to kids, to teachers, to who? Who's defining distracting? Because I can tell you, probably most of us in this room think that answer is very different than a lot of other people would, including kids. And probably some cases, being a little bit more stringent on some of it might have the opposite effect. So we have to at least be understanding of things. We were all kids, and we all thought our parents, what they thought was distracting was very different. So there's a balance, and that's not an easy thing to do. But to your point, and being inclusive, we can't have a bunch of, people who are in the latter stages of their life deciding what's distracting and what's appropriate and what's not. It's got to be a diversity of committee to figure that out, because the answers are very different, and we have to be tolerant to a point of some of that. I mean, obviously, if the kids say, I don't think that having, Bud Light t-shirts is distracting. Well, there's a point where we say, I'm sorry, you don't get to have your Bud Light t-shirt. Maybe, right? But there's also some give, I think, that can be had. And I think we have to understand what the purpose is. We have to scope it appropriately. And, kind of like mission, vision, and values, right? What's the goal of this? And then if we can align that to the goal, then I think we have our North Star, so to speak, when we're creating the policy, and not just kind of saying, if we think it's distracting, if we don't think it's right, then that's the answer. Because I don't think that's a real inclusive way to do things.
Are you suggesting like having students be part of the
I think so.
conversation?
I think so.
Yeah, I do like a lot of how our policy is written, especially when it comes to things like, T-shirts that promote drugs
Yeah.
or alcohol, things of that. nature. That's pretty specific, and that's everybody,
Right.
So I do think most of the policy is written well until you get into specific types of dress that are, generally one gender or the other.
So to be clear, the code of conduct is a document that's this big. What you guys are zooming in on is the dress code portion of the code of conduct. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to rewrite the whole thing.
No, and I think that it's important to recognize that there's an abridged version of the code of conduct as well. And much of the code of conduct is influenced by our legal representation too. So they have a role in what is said in there, just from a legal standpoint. Obviously, we lean on them to look at those as well. So that has a role in it as well. So we have appropriate language and direction. So at this point, obviously the dress code is the piece of the code of conduct that we want to look at. What might be the suggestion as the next steps? Who would we like to see move forward with that? In what direction? Do we want the administration team to look at putting things together, or?
So the role of the board right now was to provide a directive to me.
So what I would like to see is an action team put together, essentially, made up of those that we've talked about. The school leaders, building leadership, students, teachers, and any healthcare officials within the school that would be willing to. And I think it needs to be volunteer. You don't want to, but you're going to need a leader of this. Need a way for people to get involved. I don't think they can necessarily be handpicked. I'd like to see it offered up in a broader way, if possible. I'm not sure how you would want to handle that. And then have them put together what they feel the dress code should say for review.
By the way, this is the hardest thing in all avenues of life to deal with. I deal with it at work all the time. I think we revise the dress code almost yearly. If someone wears something that we decided, well, you can't wear hoodies, then someone says, well, you just gave out hoodies at the company party that have your name on. Oh yeah, well, maybe we can wear hoodies, but only on Fridays. Then someone says, well, yeah, but we just had casual Wednesday. It's like, oh no, that changed again. So I just want to say, it's not that this is a difficult topic to handle because of the nature of specificity versus being generic. And it's not threading the needle between those two is not an easy thing to do. So at least I would like to acknowledge the fact that this isn't something that someone draws up and you cookie cutter it across everything. This is very, very difficult, and it changes arguably at least every few years, as styles change every few years. This is hard, but I think it's important because for the general student population, this is like when we were kids, like anybody here was kids, this is something that's important to them for individuality. It's important to them for inclusivity and all those kinds of things. So I think it's important that we do our best to hear the voice and provide a workable solution that fits the needs of everyone. And it's not going to be easy, and I guarantee somebody won't like what we come up with, but at least if we can listen and come up with something that's equitable and inclusive, I think we did a good job.
Can I ask a question that just came across my head? I don't know who this question goes to, but in terms of when we say we don't want dress code that's distracting, and I'm assuming that means distracting from educating.
There's no language that says distracting. It says disruption of the learning environment.
Disruption, okay. And I think, just kids are probably more likely to buy into following the dress code too, if they feel like they have a voice. I don't know how to make that happen, but, just food for
Let's start with student council. I mean, they've been elected by their peers to be their voice and their representation.
Yeah.
And probably when they all ran for student council, in their campaign speeches said, I want to be a voice.
That's
for
that's
your
exactly what
represent-
they start, right? We
Yep.
have structures in place for students to advocate for change, right? Student government is one of those class advisors, that kind of thing. Every class has sort of an elected or appointed leadership structure that they can, basically be the voice of the group, right? Whatever the group is.
Yeah.
So
Agree.
I'm confident that we have the structures in place to do this. We've always had those structures in place, right? And I'm confident that we can have a process. The problem with something like this is there's a value system imposed here, right? If your staff says, this is really important, your students say, no, that's not, finding that compromise is going to be really important. Right? And probably the most difficult thing because of the values that people bring to the table. Okay.
Agree.
And that's where the legal language comes in. And so a lot of times these codes of conduct are written because there's one case where this blew up, right? The district was somehow was on this recipient of a lawsuit as a result of something. And so careful language is drafted in a lot of this code of conduct. And so our legal team will be very much involved in this too.
Yep, good,
Okay.
good point.
Any other comments, questions, or it's clear on next steps? We have a-
Yeah, so next steps is development of an action team, right? And the action team should involve leadership, students, teachers, and healthcare officials. We have to identify a facilitator for the group, and the product is to draft a dress code as a recommendation for the subcommittee.
Actions. Parents, what about parents? Are we going for any parents in this process? I think that's important as well.
I think that's incredibly important.
And this would be for the whole school, right?
The code of conduct is in
Yeah.
place for the entire district.
Yeah.
Any questions or additional?
What a time frame.
I think that action team and the first meeting should happen as quick as can be. The time frame on when it's drafted is much different because, to your point, you could have something, it takes a while to wordsmith any of this stuff because it's difficult. Then it goes to legal, then it comes back. I mean, I'm sure many people here would say, well, we should have something done by November 1st. I think that would be a tough pull. I really do. I think showing good faith effort and moving it forward is what's required. And I think we should endeavor, I'll put it out there, people will probably maybe scoff, but I think if we can get something drafted, completed, legal signed off, the whole 9 yards by the end of this year, I think we're doing pretty good.
January 1.
Because I think people who've gone through this know this is iteration after iteration after iteration before you get the lawyers to agree and the administrative staff to agree. It just takes way longer than it should. But I think that should be our drop dead date. I'd love for it to get done much quicker because I think people are clamoring for it. And I'd ask that, what's the interim? Because we are in this kind of weird period here where, so maybe I'm sorry, I'm talking out loud here, I'm thinking out loud, but maybe maybe the team can meet quick and there can be an interim solution while we endeavor for the final solution. That might be something at least that makes a step.
We're going to draft a subcommittee hopefully by November. The high school principalship is the only reason I'm thinking,
Yeah.
at least it's going to take precedent right now.
Yep. 100%.
Okay. Great, thanks for the conversation.
All right, any other discussion items that aren't on the agenda? All right, let's move on to number 4, the consent items. I'll seek a motion to approve the special education and preschool special education report.
Motion.
Moved by Brian Burton, second by Clyde Birch. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. I'll seek a motion to approve the BOCES bill.
So moved.
Moved by Brian Burton.
John.
Second by John Williams. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. All right, next is the authorization of hiring and payroll. It is recommended that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent of schools to hire and approve payroll for employees between Board of Education meetings. Final approval will be at the next regularly scheduled board. Motion by Clyde, second by John, had his hands up first. Any discussion?
So I just want to say, we talked about this in the policy committee meeting. This is to try to clarify and firm up some of the questions we've had in the past as far as hiring practices go. Scott was nice enough to reach out to a number of superintendents and do some research as to how it's handled in other school districts. So we had that conversation at policy meeting, and this will going forward be a consent agenda item on the reorg meeting every year. So this is not something that gets put in place and stays there forever. If we find that this is not working as authorization, we just don't have to approve it the next time the reorg meeting comes around. So this is kind of to close that gap in the hiring process in between board meetings.
Thank you, Brian. You're welcome. Yes, Ron.
I was trying to formulate my thoughts in my head. Yeah, I'm on the committee that Brian is on too, so it does make sense. This came up after the meetings and stuff. My concern was new positions, director positions. I still feel that should be, again, I don't need to see personnel folders or anything like that, but just maybe approve or have a special meeting or something, but like bus drivers, student aides, whatever, hire up. But if you need to hire a new director of something or a new position, I still feel a meeting of some sort should be handled, or a committee or something.
Yeah, to me, this authorization is about building trust, right? It extends a level of trust to me. And number one, I appreciate the extension of that trust. And so to Roz's point, there won't be any position that you're not aware of prior to them, coming to the Board of Education. You'll be well aware, whether it's a Friday reflection, communication with the Board of Ed president on a weekly basis. And if that doesn't happen, then I absolutely ask you to hold me accountable to that. Okay. This is about, for me, as much about transparency as possible. However, thinking about labor shortages and, the need to pounce on somebody because it's cannibalization in this area right now of the best staff, if you will, not just teachers, right? Drivers. It's one district saying, I'm going to pay $1 more an hour and people are going to jump ship. That's what's happening right now in our region. And so if I can't lock them up so that they can give their 30 days or 20 days, that prevents us from possibly getting the best talent we can. And our job for mission and vision is to bring the very best in district. And so that's what we continue to try to do. Thank you for that.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? So carried. All right, next we have action items. The board approval of section 4 varsity field hockey merger. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached merger between the Norwich City School District and Sherburne-Earlville Central School District for varsity field hockey. Moved by John, second by Brian Reed. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So carries. Committee appointment. Committee on the Special Education and Preschool Special Education. It's recommended that the Board of Education appoint the following member of the Committee on Special Education and Preschool Special Education for the 2021-2022 school year. John Martinson, CSE chairperson.
So moved.
Moved by Brian Reed,
I'll
second
second.
by Ian Hamilton. All those, any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So carried. All right. Committee appointment, Subcommittee on Special Education. It is recommended that the Board of Education appoint the following member of the Subcommittee on Special Education for the 2021-2022 school year. John Martinson, CSE chairperson. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Brian Reed, second by Clyde Birch. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Adoption of the MTSS handbook. It is recommended that the Board of Education adopt the attached multi-tiered system Supports handbook for the 2021-2022 school. Have a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Kieran, second by Roz. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Adoption of the professional learning plan. It is recommended that the Board of Education adopt the attached professional learning plan for the 21-22 school year. Motion. Motion moved by Brian Reed, or excuse me, Brian Burton, second by John Williams. You guys can't sit. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So carried. All right. Resolution authorizing commencement of e-cigarettes and vaping litigation. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached resolution authorizing the commencement of e-cigarettes and vaping litigation. So moved by Brian Reed, second by Kieran Hamilton. Any discussion?
This is at
I just- yeah.
no cost to the district. This is us jumping on board with a nationwide litigation against this, targeting our youth. And to me, it makes tons of sense. If there is the ability to recoup funds, then we will recoup funds from this, some sort of benefit package. And at that time, we'll have to, somebody gets a kickback of some sort.
This is like a huge class
Class
action.
nationwide,
like,
class action.
nationwide, Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Approval of the memorandum of understanding. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached memorandum of understanding between the Norwich City School District and the Shenango County Department of Social Services. A motion
So moved.
by Roz, second by Clyde. Any discussion?
We do this annually, correct?
This is the second.
Second year. Is this something we should be putting on the reorg meeting annually at this point?
We would have done that if we had a contract.
If we had it then?
We're
Okay,
waiting on a contract. They had some things shuffling on their end.
okay.
Is the, and this is just.
Yep.
I guess I don't have to specify why I'm asking this question. I guess, is there training or, awareness of like as needed information versus like open book information just in terms of confidentiality and protection of,
Yeah, they actually have a lot more rules around that than we would like. We would like more sharing of information. They're not allowed to.
Okay.
So we're going to see a new worker this year, case manager this year. So I can't tell you how they operate yet, but again, it's 4 days a week of them being in one building per day. Just sort of having a presence and attempting to destigmatize the support that Child Protective Services can have, and also help our child study teams be more proactive and reactive to some of the needs that are going on in the home.
I think it's, I think it's good to have more information. And I know it's probably would be more helpful to you, but I'm reassured to hear that they have and that they follow those regulations. And that's just to me that there's integrity there. And I think that's really important for families and students. Thanks for answering that.
Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So carried. All right. Seeker resolution. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached State Environmental Quality Review Act resolution. Motion moved by Brian Burton, second by Brian Reed. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Resolution of necessity. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached resolution of necessity authorizing the need for certain capital improvements. So moved by Clyde, second by Brian Reed. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? So carried. Bond resolution. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached bond resolution authorizing general bonds to finance certain capital improvements. Moved by John Williams, second by Brian Reed. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Vote proposition resolution. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the attached vote proposition resolution establishing a special meeting of qualified voters on November 19, 2020.
So moved.
Moved by Roz, second by Clyde. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
The approval of those last four allow us now to meet our obligations, to make sure that the resolution is indeed being sung 45 days in advance of the meeting. We'll be moving to that. It's already drafted. We'll be moving to that in the next couple of days. Thank you very much for that.
All right, agenda item number 6 is personnel recommendations. Do I have a motion to accept the personnel recommendations?
I'll
So
motion.
moved by Brian Burton, second by Kieran Hamilton. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? So carried. All right, public comment. All right.
Sorry, I feel this thing back in the sign sheet.
Rules for public comment. I apologize for the delay here. Usually not actually like that. Questions came up.
Probably getting wasted 90% of it.
I'll be
Ad lib.
We can wing it, yeah. Enough of us will get this.
Yeah, I know. So just remember, I have two folks on the public comment sheet. Just remember that you have 5 minutes to speak. We ask that you not direct any of your comments at other members of the public or individuals of the Board of Education, and that you're respectful in your comments. So, all right. So Michaela Sastry, you are number 1 on the list, and you're welcome to come right up front here.
Hi, Michaela.
Good evening. My name is Michaela Sastry. I'm here today to talk about our school's dress code. I know that you've been presented with this before regarding tank tops, but I have more concerns about our school's dress code policy. Teach boys to focus, not girls to cover up. Norwich High School students this past week were chanting at a protest about the dress code. In the first week of school, students are more focused on the dress code and how it's not fair rather than their education. I personally believe that our school's dress code is mainly directed towards females rather than males. There are some parts in our dress code that are directed towards both males and females, but it's mainly females that get dress coded. I don't believe that it's fair that females can't walk into school without being told to cover up or call home to change into different clothing. Kids should be able to express themselves in any way they want without having to think every morning, is this appropriate? The parts of the dress code that pertain only to females are a large part in place to ensure that the males are not distracted, or their learning is interrupted. How are females supposed to focus after being told to cover up? Being told to cover up makes females feel shamed and leaves them distracted from their learning for the rest of the day. Quote from Asheville Academy says, for some girls, they feel singled out and objectified because they're told clothing is too provocative and distracting to the boys, instead of teaching the boys to be more focused, respectful, and have enough self-control that they can take a test without being distracted by bare shoulders. How come it's about males learning and not about females' ability to be comfortable in their own skin? It takes so much less time for girls, including myself, to get ready in the morning if the dress code wasn't as strict. It's so much easier to put on leggings or sweatpants and a t-shirt and go to school and learn without being bombarded with questions such as, is your shirt buttoned up or are your shorts past your fingers? Middle school is already a very challenging time for girls disliking the way that they look. The dress code doesn't allow them to try and become more comfortable with themselves. I was dress coded exactly a week ago today on Wednesday, September 15th. I was wearing jeans with rips on the knees that were high-waisted above my navel and a black short sleeve t-shirt that landed just above my waistband, leaving about a couple inches of my midriff exposed. I took off my sweatshirt when I became warm in class And 20 minutes later, when walking to my next class, I was told in front of my peers in a crowded hallway to cover up. I was left distracted for the remainder of the day. Due to this experience, I would like to see the school convene a committee of students to talk about the dress code and help revise it to ensure that all students can express themselves and not worry that something they choose to wear will leave them feel shame during school.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela.
Jen Westervelt.
Yes.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to share, and thank you to Michaela for sharing. I'll let you know, I apologize for my tardiness and also for my quick exit. Our 7th grade son, Dean, broke his leg today. So he's in the emergency room now, and so I can't be there. I might as well be here. So I would like to just speak on the topic of the dress code. So I'm coming at this from a perspective of someone who was a middle school teacher for 14 years and is now a mom of a 7th grade and 9th grade boy, so 2 boys. And basically, I really appreciated, first of all, the board member's suggestion to invite parents to be a part of the dress code decision. I think that anytime parents can be a part of these kinds of policymaking decisions, it's a very wise move, because you do have parents who want to be involved in this community, and we appreciate the opportunity to do just that. I also just want to go back to the mission and vision and the focus on the idea that we are preparing students for a global society. And so the preparedness for them beyond high school is vital. I think you might consider reaching out, even though we do have professional members of our community on the board who could speak to dress codes at your local businesses. I think it may be wise to also invite those kinds of representatives, because I think that if we're preparing students for the global society, if they are allowed to wear certain clothing in a school setting, upon graduation, they're going to be very confused about what they can actually wear in a professional work setting. And so I think that there needs to be a bridge built between the two, so that we are in fact accomplishing our mission and vision as a school community. I also just want to speak about the fact, while I appreciate the comments that were made regarding boys need to focus, I think that there's something that needs to be recognized here on the part of boys, that, as I said, as a former middle school teacher and as a mom of 2 boys, I'd like to bring attention to the fact that there are times that when women, girls are not as covered up, and breasts, nipples, these types of parts of our bodies may be exposed, that may elicit a reaction from young teenage boys that they cannot help. They cannot physically control. Having been a middle school English teacher, I've experienced those kinds of situations where boys are put in circumstances where they are having physical ramifications from being aroused from girls not being covered up sufficiently, in my humble opinion. It puts them in a very bad position. And so equally mortifying to the accusation that young girls may face by being called out. So I really appreciate your attention to care for both genders in this conversation, because I wouldn't want that to be overlooked. My sons would be mortified to know that I'm even bringing that up, but I feel it's important to do so. We have to advocate for both sides of this. And it's not girls' shoulders I'm referencing, for sure. I think also that on the part of the student feedback that's been mentioned, it's vital that whatever dress code decisions are made, perhaps clarity too on pictures. Oxford, I know, created diagrams to help introduce their dress code so that there's no confusion on the part of students who may be caught unaware in the hallway, not knowing that what they were wearing was inappropriate. That could be certainly presented at school assemblies and such. A final point on this. I think that ultimately the way students respond when they are called out on a violation of the dress code is so vitally important, because it goes down a path based on feedback that I'm hearing from what my own children are hearing in the hallways and in their classes. It's completely inappropriate for teachers and administrators to be called pedophiles or other highly offensive, inappropriate names because they are enforcing a dress code. I would hope that we as a district can come alongside our teachers and administrators and understand that if we're asking them to enforce policies, we are behind them. And that if students respond disrespectfully, that's taken very, very seriously. Of course, students, we don't want them to be embarrassed. We don't want them to be caught off guard, but we also don't want that to trickle into disrespect that ends up affecting a bigger picture of how we handle ourselves when we are called out on a potential mistake and how to respectfully express ourselves. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share. Again, I thank you for including parents in the conversation. I think that's going to be really vital.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say, I know we're not responding. I'll do my best to not. I do want to say thanks to Jen, but a lot of courage for Michaela to get up and talk. That's not easy. So thank you.
Okay, we have executive session on our agenda. Have items for executive session.
We have personnel issues to
Personnel
discuss. There will be no action item afterwards.
Motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to go to executive session. Brian Burton, Brian Reed was second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Good, so we will not take action. Thank you very much to everyone.
A bunch.